In 2006, archaeologist Michael Waters stood on a narrow terrace overlooking Buttermilk Creek in central Texas, examining dirt that would answer a question archaeology had been asking for nearly a century. Where did Clovis technology actually come from? For generations, the answer seemed obvious. Clovis people crossed from Siberia around 13,000 years ago, bringing their distinctive fluted projectile points with them, spreading this technology across two continents in what seemed like an archaeological instant. But Waters had a different theory. What if Clovis technology wasn't imported from Asia at all? What if it was invented right here in North America by people who had been experimenting with stone for thousands of years before Clovis ever existed? The property owners, the Friedkin family, had granted Waters permission to excavate their land along Buttermilk Creek, just 250 meters downstream from the Galt site, one of the largest Clovis archaeological complexes in North America. As Waters surveyed the gentle slope, he knew that if pre-Clovis people had lived here, if they had developed the technologies that eventually became Clovis, the proof wouldn't be in the artifacts themselves. It would be in the soil. Waters directed the Center for the Study of the First Americans at Texas A&M University, and he understood that claiming anything older than Clovis required overwhelming evidence. The burden of proof was extraordinarily high for good reason. Dozens of sites had been proposed as pre-Clovis over the decades, only to collapse under scrutiny when dating proved unreliable or artifacts turned out to have migrated through the soil. The archaeological community had learned to be skeptical, and Waters knew he would need more than just stone tools buried below a Clovis layer. He would need forensic proof that those tools hadn't simply sunk through cracks in the sediment over thousands of years. His team laid out a grid system covering 52 adjacent 1 meter by 1 meter squares on the second terrace flanking the creek. They designated this excavation area as Block A and began the methodical work of removing soil layer by layer. These weren't random dirt deposits. The site sat on ancient floodplain sediments, clay layers that had accumulated incrementally during periodic flooding events over 15,000 years. Each stratum represented a frozen moment in time. In the upper portions of the excavation, everything proceeded exactly as expected. Late prehistoric artifacts gave way to archaic period materials as depth increased. Below that came late Paleo-Indian tools, then Folsom points with their distinctive fluting, and finally, around 130 centimeters below the surface, the team reached the Clovis horizon. The layer was rich with characteristic artifacts. Fluted projectile points, blade cores, end scrapers, and thousands of pieces of debitage from tool-making activities covered the ancient living surface. Waters' team documented each find with precise measurements and spatial coordinates. They photographed artifacts in situ before removal, recorded their three-dimensional positions in the grid, and carefully bagged everything with detailed labels noting exact depth and location. The Clovis occupation dated to between 12,800 and 13,100 years ago, matching perfectly with what they knew about this culture's timeline. But then they kept digging. Below the Clovis horizon, separated by a distinct change in sediment characteristics, another layer appeared. The clay here was slightly darker, more compact, different in texture from the sediment above. At first, just a few stone flakes emerged, the kind of debris that comes from tool manufacture, then blade fragments, then scrapers, then something that stopped Waters cold. It was a projectile point fragment, but the technology looked completely different from Clovis. The base had a stem for hafting, not the characteristic flute of Clovis points. Waters held the fragment carefully, turning it in his hands, examining the napping scars that showed how ancient toolmakers had shaped it. According to the Clovis first model that had dominated archaeology for nearly a century, there should have been nothing human in this deeper layer. No tools, no people, no evidence of occupation. This sediment predated the supposed first arrival of humans in the Americas. Yet here was unmistakable evidence of human craftsmanship, buried beneath Clovis in undisturbed clay. By the time excavations concluded in 2009, with additional field seasons in 2011 and renewed work from 2015 through 2016, Waters' team had recovered 15,528 artifacts from this pre-Clovis horizon. The assemblage included projectile points, blades, bladelets, scrapers, choppers, bifacial cores, and massive quantities of manufacturing debris. Before we go further, I'm curious. What country are you watching from, and what time is it where you are right now? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far lost evidence reaches across the globe. This represented sustained occupation over centuries, people who returned to this location again and again because it offered everything they needed: permanent water, abundant game, and most importantly, access to high-quality Edwards chert, the stone they used for tools. In March of 2011, Waters and his colleagues published their findings in Science, one of the world's most prestigious peer-reviewed journals. The team had used a specialized dating technique called optically stimulated luminescence, which measures the last time sediment grains were exposed to sunlight before burial. The dates were stunning. The sediments containing the pre-Clovis artifacts ranged from 13,200 to 15,500 years old. Waters called this assemblage the Buttermilk Creek Complex, and the publication concluded it confirmed the emerging view that people occupied the Americas before Clovis. Within a year, the critique arrived. In June of 2012, a team of archaeologists led by Juliet Morrow published a detailed rebuttal in the Journal of Archaeological Science. Their argument was sophisticated and focused on a fundamental problem in archaeology. How do you prove artifacts haven't migrated downward through soil over thousands of years? Morrow and her colleagues pointed out that the OSL dates might be accurate for the sediments themselves, but that the artifacts could still be younger. Perhaps they were Clovis materials that had worked their way down through microscopic cracks or through the natural shrinking and swelling of clay during wet and dry cycles. Perhaps complex soil formation processes had mixed younger artifacts into older sediment without leaving obvious traces. The critique noted that the OSL ages for the Clovis horizon at the Friedkin site appeared slightly older than expected based on radiocarbon dating from other sites. If those dates were off by 1,000 years or so, perhaps all the dates were systematically too old. The archaeological community took the critique seriously because it raised legitimate questions that needed answering. Waters knew the response couldn't just be defensive. If the Buttermilk Creek Complex was going to stand as genuine evidence of pre-Clovis occupation, he needed to address every objection with additional lines of evidence. The first issue involved understanding exactly what happens to artifacts in soil over thousands of years. Can they really migrate downward through intact-looking sediment? To answer this, Waters brought in a team of soil scientists led by Stephen Dries from Baylor University. In 2013, they published a comprehensive geoarchaeological analysis in the journal Archaeology examining the formation history of the deposits at the Friedkin site. The team used a technique called micromorphology, which involves extracting intact blocks of soil, hardening them with resin, cutting them into thin sections, and examining them under high-powered microscopes. At that magnification, details invisible to the naked eye become apparent. The orientation of individual sediment particles, the size and distribution of voids between particles, the presence of microcracks, and critically, the position of artifacts within the sediment matrix. What the micromorphology revealed was compelling. The chert microdebitage, tiny flakes produced during tool manufacture, were embedded directly in the clay matrix surrounding them. These flakes measured larger than the voids and spaces in the soil. Basic physics dictated that objects cannot pass through openings smaller than themselves. The artifacts couldn't have migrated downward because there was literally no pathway for them to travel. Under magnification, the soil scientist could see individual sediment particles pressed against the stone flakes, conforming to their irregular surfaces. If the artifacts had fallen through the soil after it was deposited, there would be gaps, voids, evidence of displacement. Instead, the contact was tight and continuous. The clay had deposited around these artifacts when they were first dropped on the ancient ground surface, then hardened in place over millennia. The microscopic evidence was as clear as a fingerprint. These tools had been lying exactly where ancient hands left them for over 15,000 years. The team examined vertical cracks that did exist in some areas of the deposit. These cracks had filled with sediment from above, creating visible infill that could be traced and mapped. But the artifacts themselves remained in their original positions, unaffected by the cracking. The analysis also looked for evidence of bioturbation, the disturbance caused by plant roots or burrowing animals. In soils where significant mixing has occurred, there's typically a telltale pattern. Smaller artifacts concentrate at depth, while larger pieces remain higher in the profile, because small objects can work their way down through animal burrows or root channels more easily than large ones. The Friedkin site showed no such pattern. Artifacts of all sizes distributed evenly throughout each layer, with no size sorting from top to bottom. The soil scientists examined the magnetic properties of the sediments, looking for evidence of the kind of churning that happens in certain clay soils. They studied the pedogenesis, the soil formation processes that had occurred since the sediments were deposited. They found that calcium carbonate had formed on artifacts in the deepest pre-Clovis layers, but not on artifacts higher in the profile. This made sense if the deepest artifacts had been sitting in place for thousands of years longer than the ones above them, giving minerals more time to accumulate on their surfaces. Every test supported the same conclusion. The deposits at the Friedkin site were minimally disturbed. The Buttermilk Creek Complex artifacts had been deposited by human hands over 15,000 years ago and had remained essentially in place ever since. The soil forensics had provided the first critical piece of evidence. The artifacts hadn't migrated, but Waters still needed to address the dating question directly. Were the OSL ages reliable? To test this, the team conducted a second round of OSL dating in 2015, targeting the same stratigraphic levels they had dated 7 years earlier. In science, replication is crucial. If two independent sets of measurements agree, confidence in the method increases dramatically. If they disagree, it suggests problems with the technique or the samples. The new OSL dates matched the original dates almost perfectly. The Clovis horizon dated to around 12,000 to 13,000 years ago, precisely where radiocarbon dating from hundreds of other Clovis sites said it should be. The Folsom layer above it yielded dates around 12,000 years ago, again matching expectations. The pre-Clovis Buttermilk Creek Complex consistently dated to between 13,200 and 15,500 years ago across both the 2008 and 2015 sampling campaigns. The concordance between the two independent sets of dates was remarkable. It demonstrated the OSL method was working exactly as it should, producing accurate and reproducible ages. Then in the summer of 2015, Waters' team made a discovery that would provide the definitive proof skeptics had been demanding. For years, they had been finding fragments of projectile points in the pre-Clovis layer, bases, tips, midsections, but never a complete point that would reveal the full form and manufacturing technique. Without whole specimens, critics could argue these fragments might be from broken Clovis points that had lost their diagnostic fluting during use and resharpening. Waters later described the moment they found the complete stemmed point as thrilling, saying he was completely surprised because he had always hoped to find one, but never knew if they would. The point was carefully crafted from local chert. It had a distinct stem at the base for attaching to a wooden or bone shaft. The overall shape differed markedly from Clovis points. Most importantly, there was no fluting, the signature technological trait that defines Clovis. This was a fundamentally different point technology. With the complete point in hand, Waters and his team could now identify all the fragments they had been recovering for years. They recognized the pattern. Many of the fragmentary bases they had found were from stemmed points just like this one. By October of 2018, Waters published a follow-up study in Science Advances, documenting multiple stemmed projectile points from the pre-Clovis horizon at the Friedkin site. The paper confirmed these points dated to between 13,500 and 15,500 years old and lay stratigraphically below the Clovis artifacts in undisturbed deposits. Projectile points are diagnostic artifacts in archaeology. Different cultures manufacture them in distinctive ways, and point styles serve as cultural signatures. The stemmed points from the Buttermilk Creek Complex represented a different technological tradition than Clovis. This wasn't just about age anymore. It was about technology. And that's when the second revelation emerged. Waters and his colleague Thomas Jennings conducted an exhaustive technological analysis comparing the Buttermilk Creek Complex to Clovis materials from both the Friedkin site and the Gault site upstream. They published their findings in American Antiquity in 2014. The analysis examined every aspect of stone tool production. How were blade cores prepared? What techniques were used to remove flakes? What types of tools were being made and for what purposes? They applied statistical methods to test whether differences between the assemblages were meaningful or just random variation. They used cladistic analysis, a method borrowed from evolutionary biology, to understand technological relationships. What they discovered challenged everything archaeologists thought they knew about Clovis origins. The Buttermilk Creek Complex and Clovis shared fundamental technological traits. Both cultures were producing blades, thin, parallel-sided flakes struck from specially prepared cores. Blade production is technologically demanding, requiring skill and intimate knowledge of stone properties. Both were using the same high-quality Edwards chert available in the area. Both were employing similar reduction strategies to turn large nodules of stone into finished tools. The assemblages differed in specific ways, but the differences suggested evolution rather than replacement. The pre-Clovis people were making discoidal cores, a production method that largely disappeared in Clovis assemblages. They were creating certain tool types that became less common in Clovis. Most tellingly, they were manufacturing stemmed projectile points, while Clovis made fluted points. The pattern suggested technological continuity with innovation. The stratigraphy at the Friedkin site showed no break between the pre-Clovis and Clovis occupations. The same location, occupied continuously, with gradual technological changes over time. This is exactly what you would expect if Clovis technology had evolved locally from earlier traditions. It's not what you would expect if Clovis represented a new population arriving from Asia with a completely different technological toolkit. The evidence was pointing toward a conclusion that would require rewriting the textbooks. Clovis technology hadn't been imported from Asia. It had been invented in North America by descendants of the people who made the Buttermilk Creek Complex. By 2023, this interpretation had become widely accepted in the archaeological community. That year, an entry on the Debra L. Friedkin site appeared in the Encyclopedia of Geoarchaeology, a comprehensive reference synthesizing decades of research. The entry confirmed the site provided clear evidence of human occupation in North America, predating Clovis by at least 2,000 years. But the implications extended far beyond just pushing back dates. The Buttermilk Creek Complex revealed where Clovis actually came from. For a century, archaeologists had assumed Clovis technology appeared fully formed because people had brought it with them from Asia. The fluted points, the blade technology, the sophisticated hunting strategies, all of it seemed too advanced to have developed quickly. But that assumption rested on the Clovis first model, the idea that Clovis people were the first humans to enter the Americas. If you're the first to arrive, you must have brought your technology with you. But if people were already here thousands of years before Clovis, if they had been working stone and developing tool-making traditions for millennia, then Clovis could represent the culmination of that long experimental process. The Buttermilk Creek Complex shows people living along this creek between 15,500 and 13,200 years ago. They were making stemmed points, producing blades, creating a diverse toolkit for hunting, hide processing, woodworking, and other tasks. They understood the properties of local stone intimately. They knew where to find the highest quality material and how to work it effectively. Generation after generation returned to this place, teaching children how to recognize good chert, how to strike flakes at the right angle, how to thin a point without breaking it. This wasn't random experimentation. It was accumulated knowledge, refined over centuries. Archaeological evidence shows they were hunting the megafauna that roamed central Texas during the late Pleistocene: mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, and other now extinct animals. The stemmed points were designed for this kind of hunting, large enough and strong enough to bring down massive prey. Then around 13,000 years ago, Clovis technology appears at this exact same location. The blade production continues. The stone selection continues. The overall approach to tool making continues. The major innovation is in the projectile points. Someone figured out how to flute a point, removing a channel flake from each face of the base to create a thinner, more securely hafted weapon. That innovation spread across North America with remarkable speed, reaching from coast to coast in just a few centuries. But the innovation didn't come from Asia. It came from people who had been living in Texas for thousands of years, people who had the time and knowledge to experiment with new techniques. Fluting might have offered advantages in hafting, allowing points to sit deeper and more securely in the shaft. Or it might have made replacing broken points easier, since the flute created a standardized base that fit into prepared shafts. Whatever the advantage, it was significant enough that the technology spread rapidly, defining what archaeologists now recognize as the Clovis culture. The evidence from sites across the Americas supports this interpretation. Just 250 meters upstream from the Friedkin site, excavations at the Galt site have documented pre-Clovis materials potentially dating back 16,000 years or more. The stone tools show the same technological patterns as Buttermilk Creek. Far to the west at Paisley Caves in Oregon, archaeologists have found a Western stem tradition, contemporary with Clovis, featuring stemmed points remarkably similar to those from Texas. At Cooper's Ferry in Idaho, evidence of human occupation extends to around 16,000 years ago, again with stemmed points rather than fluted Clovis technology. Down in Chile, Monte Verde has yielded radiocarbon dates reaching 14,600 years ago. All across the Americas, the archaeological record shows people were here well before Clovis, and many of them were making stemmed points. The Clovis fluted point wasn't the beginning of projectile point technology in the Americas. It was one variation that emerged from much older traditions. The soil at Buttermilk Creek held the proof. Micromorphology showed the artifacts were trapped in place, unable to migrate through the clay matrix. OSL dating provided accurate ages confirmed through replication 7 years apart. Geoarchaeology demonstrated the deposits were minimally disturbed. The complete stemmed point from 2015 provided diagnostic evidence of a distinct technology, and the technological analysis revealed the connections between pre-Clovis and Clovis, showing evolution rather than replacement. Every line of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. People were living in central Texas over 15,000 years ago. They developed sophisticated stone-working traditions over millennia, and from those traditions, Clovis technology emerged. The fluted point that spread across North America around 13,000 years ago wasn't an Asian import. It was an American invention, born from centuries of experimentation by people who knew this landscape intimately. The story of the first Americans is far more complex than the Clovis first model suggested. People didn't arrive as a single wave with perfect technology. They arrived earlier, probably via coastal routes along the Pacific Rim, rather than through the ice-free corridor. They spread across diverse environments, from coastal Alaska to the forests of the Pacific Northwest to the plains of Texas. They developed regional variations in their technologies, experimenting with different ways to make tools and hunt game. Some made stemmed points, some made other styles, and eventually, somewhere in the southern plains or Texas, someone invented fluting. That innovation proved so effective that it spread rapidly, creating the Clovis archaeological horizon we see across North America. But Clovis didn't appear from nowhere. It grew from roots that had been developing in American soil for thousands of years. Michael Waters spent nearly 2 decades excavating, analyzing, defending, and publishing research on the Friedkin site. He faced skepticism, critique, and the burden of overturning one of archaeology's most established models. But the soil told a story that couldn't be ignored. The microscopic evidence embedded in clay particles, the light energy trapped in quartz grains, the technological signatures preserved in stone tools, all of it pointed to a truth that had been buried for 15,000 years. The first Americans didn't bring Clovis technology with them from Asia. They invented it here, in Texas, after generations of learning this land and perfecting their craft. What makes the Buttermilk Creek Complex so significant isn't just its age. It's what it reveals about human innovation and cultural evolution. Technology doesn't appear fully formed. It develops through experimentation, failure, incremental improvement, and the accumulation of knowledge across generations. The people at Buttermilk Creek had the time to experiment because they had been in the Americas for thousands of years. They tried different point styles, different hafting methods, different approaches to tool manufacture. Some innovations failed, some succeeded, and eventually one innovation, fluting, proved so effective that it spread across an entire continent. That's not a story of sudden arrival, it's a story of deep roots and patient mastery. The dirt along Buttermilk Creek finally revealed where Clovis really came from. It came from people who had already been Americans for thousands of years. If you enjoyed this video, click on this next one for more lost evidence.